Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Former Stitch-Fix COO Julie Bornstein is creating one of the most innovative e-commerce brands on the market today, the Yes, an e-commerce retail concept only available via mobile app, and has already raised over $30 million in funding and is set to revolutionize the fashion industry.
The beauty of sort of what we've built is we're called the Yes. The whole system is built and based on the customer's yeses and nos. And as a customer is shopping, they can yes and no the product, kind of like a thumbs up, thumbs down, but in our own branded way. And you don't have to do it as you're shopping, but as you see stuff you like and don't like, the stuff you like, we learn about your preferences and we save that for you if you want to come back to it. And then the no's are really helpful.
In this podcast, we discuss her professional journey, lessons learned along the way, and Julie gives us some great advice on how to navigate through another year of the COVID era. Julie, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on board. I'm very excited to chat with you. You've got such a deep, rich background in retail, and now you've got such an interesting concept. So let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about your personal and professional journey that got you to where you are today, and then we'll get into talking about the Yes.
Great. Well, I grew up in Syracuse, New York in the 70s and 80s and spent every weekend in the mall and had a lot of ideas about how things could be done better. Always loved fashion and retail. When I was a government major in undergrad, but when I was graduating, I really wanted to sort of try out the business world and try out the fashion world. So I pounded the pavement in New York and got a job at Donna Karan, working really on the wholesale side, in the merchandising function there, which was sort of in between production and sales. Got a little taste of it. Thought maybe it wasn't for me, actually. Went back, worked in nonprofit and went to business school. But in business school, sort of as I was trying to learn, I ended up working in investment banking and found myself very drawn to the retailers that we were working with. I worked on a few sales and IPOs. And so I decided to pursue a career in retail. And it was the late 90s, and my husband was at Amazon, so I was headed to Seattle and had the chance to meet Howard Schultz and ended up going to work for Starbucks for a few years. And that was really before Amazon had just gotten started and e-commerce was not yet much of a thing. But I was fascinated by the Amazon experience and as a consumer, and kept thinking about the version of that for fashion and clothing. And then, lo and behold, Nordstrom announced they were going to be launching e-commerce. And I spent about 6 months trying to convince Dan Nordstrom to hire me, and finally was successful. And then I spent 5 years helping to build Nordstrom.com, which really wonderful. So much learning. It was the early days. Technology was fairly limited, but I had lots of ideas that we couldn't do yet. I then ended up going to Urban Outfitters to help them build out e-commerce, and dragged my husband and kids across the country to Philadelphia. We were there for 2 years, and then I got recruited by Sephora, and we ended up back in San Francisco. And at Sephora, the mandate was build a loyalty program and take this sort of dated fledgling e-commerce business. The reason it was dated was because they actually started fairly early at Sephora in the late 90s, but the system was completely outsourced and we needed to rebuild e-commerce internally. So I spent 8 years at Sephora building Beauty Insider and Sephora.com. And it was really a wonderful experience. I sort of merged into a CMO role there. So I also oversaw the marketing organization. And then during my time there, I met Katrina Lake, the founder of Stitch-Fix, and was very taken by her idea. Had spent a lot of time thinking about data, personalization, fashion. And so it was a very good meeting of the minds. And I ended up joining her board. I was on her board for 2.5 years. And then the company was really starting to take off and needed a lot of, hiring and organizational
scaling and all those
scaling opportunities. So I joined full-time as COO, and I was there for the next 2.5 years, helping build the business to $1 billion. It was a really fascinating and fun experience. And then decided to launch out on my own and started the Yes. And so I spent, I left Stitch-Fix in the fall of 17 and started talking with investors. And in the spring of 18, raised our first round of money. I also spent that time trying to find a technical co-founder. The idea was we're really a tech platform. So that was an essential role. And I knew I needed someone with a very specific set of experiences around machine learning, search and personalization, and was fortunate to meet Amit Agarwal as he was an entrepreneur in residence at one of the venture firms at Bain Capital. And so we met and spent many months talking as I spent time talking with investors, and we decided to go for it. And we raised our first round in March of 2018. And then we spent 2 years building a very, I would say, complicated technology infrastructure to support the business that we are now. We have a team of 35 people, about 25 are engineers, another 5 are product and designers. And then we have a very small brand partnerships team, small and mighty, and a team that does sort of social and marketing. And so the idea behind the Yes is really shopping is overwhelming. Fashion is a really big and also complicated category to sell online, something I've been doing for a very long time. And I really felt like the sort of next frontier relied on technology that wasn't built into the current e-commerce infrastructure. And so if you look at the tech stack of any established e-commerce company, it's set up in a fairly rigid way, one size fits all, navigation, very traditional, and that has not changed. I mean, if you look at the Nordstrom site today and you look at when I was there in the early 2000s, very little has changed to that user experience. And
right. I mean, the fundamentals, you're right, haven't changed. I mean, you and I have a couple of intersection points in that I was trying to launch Hudson's Bay's e-commerce in 1999, 2000. Was it always your sense as you kind of progressed through this amazing journey, because it's brought you back to apparel, was it always your sense that it would be such that apparel was the best opportunity? I mean, even going all the way back to Syracuse, were you seeking to solve a gap? Were you seeking to solve a problem that you experienced around shopping for a particular commodity, or was it the customer behavior that kind of propelled you forward and drove your thinking?
It was the category. I've always loved fashion. I've always thought it's so nuanced and unique and such an expression of each of our personalities and our moods that day. So it's always been the category that's kind of been my first love. And then I also think it's a category that lends itself really well to innovation, because it is such a nuanced category. You know, you look at what Spotify and other media companies are doing, YouTube, and you do it with news, and there's really great ability to understand the user preferences and create a sort of experience around each user, like has been done in Spotify, and YouTube has done it really well, but no one had done it in fashion. And at Stitch-Fix, we were doing some of those things. It was certainly the first to really take data science seriously and figure out how to marry it with customer preference. But the model itself is quite different. It owns the inventory, so it's limited by that, and it works well for a certain customer type. But the more fashion-forward, brand-oriented customer is not particularly well served by the Stitch-Fix model, because there's not quite enough choice in it, and there's still too much randomness in the style preferences. And so my goal was really to take, yes, you and I were living totally parallel lives in 99 and 2000, but to take all the complexities around the fashion category and really marry it with a deep set of data that understands every nuance of a product. There's so much around, of course, there's price and brand. And then there's obviously fit, size and fit. And then there's all the things that create a style. You take 2 black shirts and they could both be black short sleeve shirts, but there could be, so many differences in the cut and the styling and the fabrication. And so there's so much that goes into actually building a good recommendation engine in fashion. And I felt like no one was really doing it. There were a lot of technology ideas out there, but they didn't have consumer facing value. And then there were a lot of obviously fashion companies, but they're doing it in a very light way. And I knew that if we needed to do it, we had to build a really deep understanding of the product category and then a deep understanding of the user, and then build an interface that allows us to learn from the user as she shops. And I'm not a huge fan of implicit data. I really love explicit data. I feel like there's so many inferences that sort of recommendation engines across the board make that are wrong. And so the beauty of sort of what we've built is we're called the yes. The whole system is built and based on the customer's yeses and nos. And as a customer is shopping, they can yes and no the product, kind of like a thumbs up, thumbs down, but in our own branded way. And you don't have to do it as you're shopping, but as you see stuff you like and don't like, the stuff you like, we learn about your preferences and we save that for you if you want to come back to it. And then the no's are really helpful because that's a very strong, signal. And that allows the app and the shopping experience for the consumer to evolve and get better over time. But it required us to build a technology layer that is really built on sort of a one-to-one neural network. So each user has their own experience, and the app adapts to the user. And so that technology is very hard to build into a current e-com infrastructure, and where I knew we needed to start over.
Well, we intersect in even more ways because at Hudson's Bay, I helped start and run their CRM division. We had 8 or 9 million people, and we were big fans of the hands-up strategy. That's what we called it. In other words, let's not guess, let's not build fancy algorithms and try to project algorithm on top of an algorithm. Let's just ask people what their preferences and try to, we called it the drip irrigation model. Every time we intersect with somebody, we ask them another little thing and another little thing and another little thing. Well, it sounds like an amazing concept. Now you've had a great journey, lots of different backgrounds. We've all had a bit of a different journey over the past 10 months. I'm wondering now, is your advice to the listeners around 2 starts and 1 stop based on what you've learned over your career, which is clearly reflected in your concept, but also lately around going to market, and 2 things they should start doing based on your experience, and then 1 thing they should stop doing. Maybe that's something that you thought was going to work for you, and didn't, or stopped working, or something you observe others doing. Give me a sense of those 2 starts and 1 stop.
I would say on the starts topic, one thing I am definitely thinking about is planning. So the first half of the year and the second half of the year differently. And I am an optimist, eternal optimist. And so I am assuming by the second half of the year, the world will start to return to some level of normalcy. And I do truly fundamentally believe that we are all going to want to throw out and burn our sweats and get dressed again. And
it's the roaring 20s. We're back to the roring 20s, right?
I mean, that is, in a modern version of it, yes.
Yeah. No zoot suits.
Exactly. So I do think, starting to really plan for sort of a shift in consumer behavior in the back half of the year is something that I optimistically believe is a smart thing to do. I would say the other thing on the start is, it's interesting. Last year, we were focusing on just get through the year. And, it was such a complete shock to the system to go from the beginning of March, where we were like, oh, this may be a few weeks, to it being such a long thing. And so I do feel like on, the flip side of the first start, the idea of fully embracing the way we're working and really starting to make some changes that, I would say alleviate or leverage remote working. So for us at the S, I think we are all very aware of the fact that the work is from home on Zoom all day long, has a real tedious nature to it that real life work didn't have. And so to that end, we decided we do monthly sprints, and we decided to give 1 day off after each sprint, just an extra bonus day, just for people to clear their heads, hopefully get up and out. And I just think that kind of thing, as we're bracing for at least another 6 months of this, will be really helpful. As
an executive leader, I've talked to lots of CEOs, some of whom had a lifelong distrust, I'd put it, for home work. People working at home, they like to have people in the office more than not. Where did you sit on that fence from the beginning? Did you has this been a big transition in your thinking, or is it just evolved your thinking a little more?
It's been a fairly big transition, although I have to say, I feel like we go to work for more than just to get the work done. And that sort of socialization and interaction is such a core sort of need for humans. Not everyone. There are some people on our team who certainly like this. I think where we will land, I would never have thought of spending more time remotely. So this certainly has shifted dramatically. I do feel we will go back to the office, at least our team, and we may do 1 or 2 days remote for people who want to, because clearly that's, I think, especially for people with big commutes or other extenuating circumstances, there's been relief to this in that case. And so, I think it'll be more of a hybrid model. And my gut is that's kind of where most companies will land.
Yeah, I hear that word hybrid most often. Exactly. So what are your thoughts on one thing people should stop doing?
I think one of the things that we can all stop doing, because we now have enough time under our belt, is guessing what would have happened and not planning for the current situation. So I think, depending on your business, there's been a boom, there's been a bust, there's been a shift in categories that are selling. And I think we can stop focusing on what would have been, and we have enough data to really focus on what this next 6 months is going to look like, given what we've learned already. To some degree, it's exhausting to figure out what it would have been and what it is. And I think this year, everybody's now in a mindset and a place where we understand what's happened and what's changed, and we can just focus on what we anticipate to be this year based on the experiences we had last year.
Right on. Leave the hypothesis behind. Let's move forward.
Exactly.
So you're on the virtual stage at Commerce Next. What are you doing there?
We have a great panel. We're talking about the intersection of customer experience and digital businesses. And we are talking about mobile and loyalty, and it's going to be really fun.
Oh, fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Listen, it was so great to have the opportunity to chat with you. Such a rich background in retail and such an interesting concept. So I encourage everybody to visit. Is it theyes.com? Do I have the URL right?
It is, yes. And then right now we're app only. So we're the Yes on the Apple App Store.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thanks again, Julie, for taking the time to join me on the Voice of Retail podcast. I wish you much continued success and look forward to see you on the virtual stage at Commerce Next.
Thank you.
Today's podcast is part of an ongoing series of Commerce Next episodes that will feature some of the fantastic speakers taking the virtual stage January 27th and February 3rd with snapshot insights into how they dealt with online e-commerce in the first year of the COVID era and lessons learned for the future. You can learn more and register for Commerce Next at commercenext.com. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating and review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe and have a great week.